Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of From the Lighthouse. I'm Stephanie and I'm here today by myself. So I have brought in a former student and friend of the podcast, Claire Catacouzinos. Hi Claire.
Hi, how are you going?
Good.
Thank you for having me.
No worries at all. Thank you for coming in. And so the reason we've got Claire is because Claire graduated with a Master of Creative Writing in 2014. So she's one of our most illustrious former students.
Oh, thank you.
And she is a writer of historical fiction and a writer of contemporary YA fiction. So we thought that we'd bring her in today in order to talk about both her writing career and also just managing being a young writer, because Claire is very useful and she has a lot of helpful advice to give to other young writers out there. And I know that many of you listening would be interested in her insights. She actually spoke to my PACE unit, which is our internships unit, and she was so good and so useful that I thought we have to bring you in and share these insights with the wider audience. So Claire, my first question for you is, when did you decide to pursue a career in writing, and why? What made you interested?
Okay, so when I was little, Mum would always take us to the library, would go reading to the public library, and then I used to write letters to a friend when I was about, I think, maybe 8 or 9 years old in year 3 or year 4 because I swapped schools. So I was corresponding a lot with just writing letters, and this is before emailing.
Yeah, it was like paper. Wow.
Yeah, this is paper writing. So I used to write letters with a friend. We did it for about, I think, maybe 2 to 3 years when I was younger. And then I got really obsessed with the Harry Potter series when I was 14, as you do at that age of your life. But, I started writing Harry Potter fan fiction, so the surprising thing about that is that I used to be a Draco and Hermione fan.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, I know, yeah. So I used to write Draco and Hermione fan fiction with another friend as well that used to go to the same school as me. And because I thought to myself, J.K. Rowling has done just such an amazing job with the story that she's created with the Harry Potter world, and I thought, why can't I do that? Yeah. So I started writing Harry Potter fan fiction on the side. There is some stuff still on the internet about it. Yeah. But I won't ever reveal my name with that. But it was a lot of fun. But it was just a great avenue to get me started with just writing, prose fiction writing. And then when I was 17, I was in year 11, and I then wanted to then start just, other types of writing with short stories. And I did a short story for a task for school, and my teacher gave it back to me, and just written down in a green pen was, "You're a born writer, Claire." And I thought, oh, that is so sweet. Wow. That somebody who's not a family member or a friend, it's a teacher who actually saw my potential, if I had any potential. Yeah. And the funny thing was that she even went up to my sister, because she was my sister's homeroom teacher, and she even said to her, "Oh, your sister's short story was amazing." And I thought, well, that's nice of her to go out of her way to even talk to my sister about it, who she was a homeroom teacher for. So from there, she then asked me if I wanted to participate writing my first novella in a Somerset competition. Oh, wow. So at the age of 17, I wrote my first, I think it was a 20 to 25,000 word novella, and knew I wasn't going to win the competition, but I just thought it's just a great way for me just to get started with completing a manuscript and, a big story. Such an important lesson. Yeah. So very important lesson. And then the editing stage as well. So that was another. I wrote actually 30,000 words, but I had to cut down by 5,000 because of the submission. But just a great task just to set your mind to something with the mental toughness of just sitting down and just writing your story and finishing it. And then we've just talking to my teacher. She even said to me, Claire, the great advice that she gave me was, by the age of 25, if you go and educate yourself at uni and you learn all there is to know about creative writing, by the age of 25, you will know everything there is to know. So that great advice I took on board when I was 17. So that's why I structured my writing around that goal. And that's why I picked Macquarie, because it was the best one that had everything that I wanted to do. It's got the beautiful lake, the natural environment. But also just I could do creative writing. I could do my ancient history major, because I'm a big fan of ancient history, as you can tell, because I write ancient historical fiction set in ancient Greece. And, so that's how that started. But the funny thing was, if I hadn't met that teacher, I wouldn't have kind of pursued it. So when I was 17, in year 10 really, you pick your units that you want to do, your subjects that you want to do in year 11, year 12. And I had to go in, and we all had interviews with teachers about the subjects that we had chosen. My mum came in with me, and I had a chat with one of the teachers, and they just questioned my academic ability, or my English ability. to do Extension English 1,
Mm.
which I thought was a bit of an insult as well to yourself, because it kind of like hits your confidence of, wow, I kind of want to pursue doing this in year 11, year 12, but the teachers are saying they just questioned my ability.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
so I didn't do Extension English 1, even though in year 10 I was doing after school courses to get myself ready to do it. But then if I hadn't done that, all the Extension English girls were in a different teacher's class. They were in the top advanced English class. But if I hadn't done Extension English 1, I wouldn't have met my teacher who gave me that advice.
Yeah,
And
so it
that's
ended up well.
Yeah, so in a weird way, in hindsight, you think to yourself, wow, that's why it's turned out. And I'm actually grateful I didn't do that. But then when you hear girls doing Extension English 2, you're like, oh, they're writing their own projects. I would have loved to have done that.
But you were writing your own
Yeah,
projects.
so I was doing it, but I wasn't being assessed on it. That was the only difference. But it was just where it was meant to be.
Yeah, that's right. And so then you came to uni.
Yep, came to uni. I started my Bachelor of Arts degree in Ancient History and Creative Writing. Met wonderful teachers, and then in my first year, I you start writing your short stories to start working out what kind of writer you are, how you want to brand yourself. And then it wasn't until about my second year, after I'd written a couple of short stories, that I started getting the nitty-gritty that I wanted to start writing historical fiction. I was also trying to somehow figure out how to write about my Greek Australian background. Didn't do that until my master's degree, when I did a poetry unit with myself, Raymond, and I started writing about, feeling displaced in the Greek Australian community and how I wanted to come across that way with my own writing. And poetry gave me that avenue to do that. But my graduate degree, with my master's, it kind of like reinforced everything I was trying to write during my Bachelor of Arts degree.
Yeah. So I wanted to go back to a few of the things that you mentioned. So you mentioned writing historical fiction.
Yep.
So I wondered if you could talk about that and what drew you to historical fiction, especially historical fiction about ancient Greece, because I believe that is you're publishing a book.
Yep, I'm publishing a book with my publisher Zuzul in the US. It's a book set in ancient Greece, and I'm a big fan of ancient Greece. Since I was a little girl, I used to sit and watch, Hercules, Xena the Warrior Princess with my papu, which in Greek means grandfather. And my dad also introduced me to, all the great historical epics, the 1950s, Cleopatra, Ben-Hur, Jason the Argonauts, and even like the Arabian Nights with Sinbad, all those great, historical epics. So I was a big fan of that. I was introduced to it as a child because of my Greek heritage. So Dad was a big fan and a big advocate about just spreading, the love of Greek culture. So that's where the ancient history side of it came from. So I just grew up around, being surrounded by just, ancient Greek statues and the marbles and the columns and everything. So I've just got really just, thrown into it as a kid. And then I kind of wanted to pursue just the magical part of, being thrown back into the ancient world and how I can educate people, my passion for ancient Greece in a way in fiction. So just to educate kids about, ethical understanding, having empathy for other people, and just to walk in somebody else's footsteps.
Yeah.
And also the great things about, the costumes that they wore and the hair and just, the whole theatrics of it I just love.
So what sort of research do you do? I mean, you mentioned studying ancient history at uni. So do you, when you set out to write a story or a book set in ancient Greece, do you go back and reread the sources? So,
I reread a lot of the sources. A lot of the times I get my ideas from my ancient history major that I did my Bachelor of Arts degree, and it's just I pinpoint things that I really want to write about. So the one thing that I really love to advocate for is giving voices to lower social classes that didn't have a voice back in their days.
Yeah.
Because history's written, from the big guys.
Yeah.
So you've got
usually
kings,
guys.
And usually guys too.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to give a voice to those social classes that didn't have a voice. So with my first short story, Halike, that I published when I finished uni, part of the Quarry E-Journal, and then I also got it published as a hard copy in the MC Squared magazine through the Cultural Studies unit as well. It was from the point of view of a young girl who they considered Halike. They discovered this archaeological site, and they considered it to be like the lost Atlantis, and also to be similar to the Pompeian Herculaneum, that it's this, great lost city. It's got so much history and stories to tell. So I thought, what if I write from the perspective of a person who, inevitably they're going to die, but it's kind of like what kind of story you could tell and what was the drama that was going on, what was the signs and the symptoms that there was going to be an earthquake and then a tsunami that destroyed the whole city. And then another short story that I wrote was Taras's Parthenians, and that is literally just, the Spartans 300. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
So it's quite funny. My brothers walk around and they go, this is Sparta, the young Greek boys do. It's quite funny. But what I loved about learning about the Spartans, even when I was in Year 12 learning about ancient history, was there was this group of young men who were ostracized because they were born from slave women, but their fathers were Spartans, but they were like half caste. So I thought to myself, was there an act of rebellion on their part to, take back their ownership, like their rights, that they should have some property, because the Spartans were very different people. So that's where that short story came from, that inspiration. And these actual men were real figures in history, and they actually rebelled against the Spartans and then separated themselves. And I think they colonized, I think it was a part of Italy, and they set up a little town there. So that's what I wrote about in that short story. And I also thought, I like writing about a little bit of romance. Got to throw a little bit of romance in. Yeah. So I thought I'll write a story about a young girl who is a Spartan. She's supposed to be marrying, a full-blooded Spartan man, but she's fallen in love with this guy who's half Spartan, half a slave. So that's where that story came from.
So you're using real-life kind of discoveries and incidents.
Yeah, and then creating a little fictional part about and what, like, the humanity side of it and the emotions behind a story. Yeah, so just creating a story with those historical facts. So that's where my research comes from. And then I also wrote a story about, I think it's called Golden Drachmas. That was another short story published with the Corey E-Journal, which is fantastic just to get some historical fiction out there, because it's such a hard thing to publish, historical fiction. But with that story, it talks about, the ancient Greek coins and how they actually were manufactured back in the day. So I did some study when I was doing my Bachelor of Arts degree, and I thought, what if I could write a story about how ancient Greek coins were made and who actually made them? Yeah. So I created a story about a young girl who was originally from a different town, but she was a slave, and she's disguised herself as a boy so she could work to make herself a living.
Right.
Meanwhile, she's in love with her. Another little love story. She's in love with her master's son, who was a painter, and that's where that story came from. And I also wanted to depict, because a lot of stories are written about the Athenians and the Spartans, but I thought about, what about the other ancient Greek islands or the other islands in general? So my family's from, I got 3 grandparents that are from the island of Lesbos, and one's from Limnos. So there's also the other great Greek islands. So you've got Tharsos, which one of my stories is from. You got Kythera, Zakynthos. So I wanted to start giving voices to other people from different areas of the ancient Greek world, to give them just a voice that they don't have, because you mostly just hear about the ancient Spartans and the ancient Athenians.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's why I wanted to, start giving them a voice as well.
Branch out. It sounds like, too, that your Greek heritage has fed into a lot of your writing career. I was wondering if you could talk about that a bit.
So with that, I started writing poetry when I was doing my Master's of Arts degree with Marcel Freeman. So I was trying to write, which I'm still writing now, it was a novella about Greek-Australian identity and how you feel displaced in the Greek-Australian cultural community. So you've got cultural displacement. So the one thing I loved growing up was reading Melina Maketa's book, Looking for Ali Brandy, which you guys did a podcast on, which I thought was fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
And it was fantastic. So I loved listening to it. There was, it was just talking about accepting your difference and the other. So when at school and even at work, there's a sense of difference that you feel. So I was trying to work out where I fit in the Greek-Australian community. And I was reading a book. I started doing research just to understand, like, what I was trying to say about my identity, where I've come from, where do I fit, where do I belong? And the kind of thing that started from that was during my HSC, we were the first year who did belonging with our English. My sister did journeys, and now they're doing discoveries.
I was the generation that did journeys.
You did journeys, yeah. So my sister was the last year that did journeys, and we were the first year that did belonging. Yeah. But it made me question a lot about my upbringing and the fact that you can sometimes feel just displaced in your own community. So, for example, Greeks are they're born Greek Orthodox. So when we go to church, for Easter especially, or for weddings, they speak in Greek or ancient Greek. And half the time my parents also don't understand it, even though they speak fluent Greek. but even not knowing ancient Greek, but you sit there and you just kind of feel like you don't belong because you're not understanding what they're saying. So even though I went to a Catholic school, it was great to hear the liturgy and the Mass in English. But when you're supposed to be going to a place every year, kind of like doing your penance, you can't understand them. So you kind of feel, am I Greek?
Yeah.
So am I Greek? What am I? And then even with my name, my first name's not Greek and it's not Christian. It's quite funny because I was named after my grandmother Claire, who passed away, I think how long has it been, 3 years ago now? But I was named after her, and her name was Claire, and I thought, God, she would have had a lot of problems being raised on the Greek island of Lesbos with a first name that's not even Greek, and I get judged even now for not having a first Greek name.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So you deal with that displacement and the judgment as well. So when my parents would introduce me and my brothers and sisters to just, different family members or different, like, people that you meet, different Greek people, they go, this is Maria, my daughter Claire, John and William. So my brothers and sisters, they've got traditional Greek names, but I've got a name that's not Greek and not Christian. So people would always question my parents and say, oh, her name's not Greek. Why did you name her that? And Mum would have to say, oh, it's actually, she was named after her grandmother. Yeah. And I was like, well, why was her grandmother named that? Yeah. Because it's just people just constantly question your identity and who you are. So
your place,
and your place in the world. So I thought, okay, there's that aspect of it. So I wrote a poem called Name Day. The fact, in Greek tradition, people have name days.
Yep.
I don't have a name day. I make jokes about it with my mum and dad and my brothers and sister, but with name days, that's the Greek cultural part.
Yeah.
You can get presents, or people pull your ear for good luck on your name day.
Oh, really? Is that
it?
Because I have a name day too.
You even got a name day.
Yeah, because my family background is Italian, and my name day is the 26th of December.
See, at least you got a name day.
But no one's ever pulled my ear.
Oh no, but they should do that. It's like for good luck, they pull your ear.
Oh, I want them to pull my ear.
Yeah, so I've always wanted that. I've never experienced that, but you kind of feel a little bit like you don't belong, or you feel a little bit displaced because your brothers and sisters, they've got that, cultural tradition there, but it's like you've never felt that, so why don't I have that? But my name actually, there's a funny thing, my name actually has come from my grandmother, and it's because her dad, my great-grandfather, which is funny to say that. My great-grandfather, he left to go to America, and he did, they worked there as migrants and stuff, and then when he came back, he actually fell in love with the name Gladys and Claire. And I was lucky I was called Gladys. Yeah. I know, because in Greek, Gladys is Galatia, which is kind of like full on if you hear it. But my Greek name is Clary or Clary.
Right.
So that's why I wrote a poem about that, because I was trying to work out how I can write what I'm feeling in prose fiction, but it just wasn't working. Whereas poetry, I was able to just, get the rhythm, use poetic words to just get across that feeling of not belonging but belonging.
Oh, that's such an interesting story.
Yeah, so that's where that side of my writings come from. So you've got my love for ancient history and the love of the Greek culture, but then you've also got the other part, whereas I'm just trying to work out my identity, the quest for self, as the journey that you're on in life, as people say. But that's why with my novel that I'm currently proofreading to try and get it published is about feeling the cultural dichotomy so that you're displaced. So it's trying to work out, I can alternate from being Greek and Australian in one day. I can have, a shepherd's meat pie, and then I can go home and have, a traditional meal of stuffed tomatoes and for pasta, because my partner's Italian. So it's just alternating from the different background that you're coming from. So I wrote another poem about that. It's called Metaxi, which in Greek means an in-betweener. So just trying to work out, just your place in the world. And the book that I've written, that I'm trying to get published as a manuscript, is about two different characters. One's from the Greek Australian community, like full-on Greek, like he's the son of a Greek Orthodox priest. So he's full thrown into questioning his Greek identity, where he belongs to fit in the Australian community. And then you've got the girl who's kind of like me. She's Greek Australian. So the other aspect in my stories that I like to explore is feeling linguistically alienated. I can't speak fluent Greek. I understand it. I've been brought up with it. So I understand words here and there. And even talking to your grandparents is a bit of a language barrier as well.
Yeah. Common migrant.
Common migrant thing,
Yeah.
which I know you guys talked about with Jimmy and Michelle with Looking for Ali Brandy. I'm pretty sure it was in the podcast. I was like, yes. I'm like, yes, this is what I'm talking about. This is what I want to write about. So it's this character who feels linguistically alienated from her grandparents as well, and just trying to work out, do you learn Greek, the judgment that you feel from the older generation as well. But it's like, this is the norm of Australia. So, like, even when I get married to my partner, or, you know, I've got a Macedonian cousins and stuff, like, will we be speaking that language with our children? Like, you keep your traditions and stuff, but it's also, I was trying to explore the language aspect of it.
That's really interesting, because language becomes a kind of way of nutting these out, because, like I said, it's so common, that story, you know, my family too, your parents speak to you and then you just respond in English.
Yeah, that's it. And that's the initial thing that you do. And the thing is that I never was able to speak to my grandparents in English back, because you would always speak back in English to them. So you don't have the mouth or the stoma in Greek that they say, that you haven't, not that you've articulated, but you haven't molded out the tongue for speaking fluent Greek.
Yeah, the grammar is what always gets me. Like I'm really good with words, but just not stringing them together as a sentence.
Yeah, and then speaking in a conversation, a fluent conversation.
Yeah.
So then I also studied as well on the sideline for my own research for my book and also for myself. I did modern Greek studies at Sydney University. I did a beginner's course and another course. But the thing is, I did Greek school when I was in year 1 and year 2 when I was at that age, and then I tried to do it again in year 10 when I came back from Greece with my parents and my brothers. It was the first time I went to Greece when I was 14. But you kind of feel that shock of displacement when you go there, because you've been brought up and you think, yeah, my family, this and that, this is normal. But when you go to Greece and you get thrown into that community where it's like full on, you're like, why can't I speak it? Why am I a little bit different from the kids? But yet I've been brought up this way in Australia. So
did you feel very Australian when you were in Greece?
Yeah, very Australian. But then when you're here, you feel like you're Greek. But people, it's trying to understand that identity crisis, if you want to call it.
Yeah.
And working out where you belong. So that's where my poetry and my novel that I'm writing, my manuscript, comes from, is this character trying to work out where she fits in. So you've got your Aussie side, you've got your Greek side.
Yeah.
And then I've also, my brother's got Lebanese friends and Macedonian friends, and it's like we're all experiencing that same problem. So with my writing, I'm trying to write about the emerging types of Australians.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really important, because Australian, especially children's literature, has been very heavily monocultural.
Yeah.
And we haven't still, even though, you know, Looking for Brandy was 25 years last year.
Yeah.
So, you know, even now we still haven't quite
worked out.
Incorporated those voices.
So that's why I'm trying to, barge that through and get that barrier out there. But I read a book called Hate is Such a Strong Word by a Lebanese writer, and a lot of the stuff that I was trying to write about, she's written perfectly with the Lebanese Australian community. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's important. I think it's really important to get those kind of diverse voices out there.
And I'm trying to find more of that fiction out there, the novels out there that's being published by Australian publishers. So, yeah.
How would you sort of describe, I mean, this is kind of veering off, but how would you kind of describe the Australian kind of children's literature publishing market? I mean, I'm aware of some kind of trends in children's lit publishing, but do you think that there's a big demand for those sorts of stories at the moment?
There is a big demand. So with contemporary Australian fiction, with YA, they're trying to get voices published. It's just about getting through that slush pile, which is the main problem. And the advice that I was going to give to writers is that you need to start networking with people from the industry. So attending events and getting to know the publishers and the editors, and not being too scared to do that. Because I know writers are all introverts, but you're trying to make a statement, and you want your book to be into the good hands of people that you know that are trying to. So working in book publishing at Penguin Random House, I was able to get that experience from sitting in the acquisitions meetings, that they're thirsty for it, they're waiting for it, they're just, it's just getting through that process and getting your book into their hands.
So after uni, you went to and worked in publishing?
Yes.
Yeah. So how did you find that experience? Was that useful for you as a writer?
Very, very useful. So I learned a lot about the book publishing world. I worked in the sales department as the sales administrator for the children's department, and it was fantastic. A big eye-opener just into the book publishing industry. attending events, publicity and marketing, the campaigns that you need to do as a writer for yourself, and that your publisher will do for you as well. But just understanding how a book, the different developments of a book and the different stages that it goes through with it being acquired by the publishers and editors. And a lot of it to do is with either a literary agent, which is another hard thing to get, through the slush pile, or through networking and just getting contacts in the book publishing world. So I learned that way about how you can get your foot in the door. Then there's also the sales department, and they need to sell the book for the company to, still live on, and they need to pay their work, like their colleagues and
this
their workers.
Is a business, yeah.
It's a business, so they need to be able to sell the book, and that's the difference between like a bestseller and a book that might become an educational book on the side. So, but the company needs those big bestsellers.
Yeah, to keep afloat.
Yeah, so I also understood more about the sales point of view as well, which is a really biggie in the book publishing world.
I know in America that literary agents are kind of how you get a foot in the door. Is that so much the case in Australia?
No, it's not. So I tried.
Yeah.
Another story here.
Yeah.
I tried getting a literary agent in America. Mm-hmm. That was very tough. So I wrote a historical fiction, young adult novel, based on the island of Lesbos, obviously where my parents are from, my family. It's called Arisvi, and it's just about two different dual focalization from boy and girl's point of view. Again, a little love story in there, as I do. But I've been trying to get this book published for a long time, let's say about 5 years. And I started, once I can finish the book, edited it down and educated myself with the editing experience, because it's a whole nother ball game that every writer should know how to do, is a structural edit, a copy edit, and then proofreading. But what I did is I tried to get it published in America, and I went and I booked an appointment for a consultation with Sophie Hamley at the Faber Academy, and she just gave me advice and she said, my writing's good, I'm a beautiful writer. She goes, but is there a marketplace for historical fiction in Australia? And she also said that the American market is bigger because there's about roughly 24 million Australians, but there's 240 million Americans. So there's a big market out there. And she goes, to get your foot in the door, you need to start emailing literary agent. This is the process. Go to this website. So I took that on board, and she also said something else to me, that the only thing Australian about this book is you. So why would you limit yourself to only publish it in Australia? You need to be looking in the American market or the UK. So I thought that's good advice. Yeah. So I took that on board. I've sent over 100 emails to literary agents, and you got to do your research. So there's a literary agent website that you can go to, and you can see which agent publishes which genre. So I had to go onto this website. I can't remember what it's called now to, give you guys advice. But
we can put that in the show notes later.
You can look it up.
Yeah.
But there's a website, and you research. You click onto every single literary agent and their company, and you see the different literary agents, what they publish. So I was looking for historical fiction, but also young adult fiction. So I found a couple of people here and there, and I started emailing. My book so that's the first query. You got to send your query. So you got to make sure you adhere to their guidelines, which is a really big deal, because if you haven't written it properly, they won't bother reading it, because they receive thousands of emails a day. So
don't give them a reason to call you.
No, don't give them a reason. So you need to make sure you read their guidelines. So that's what I did. I had 3 literary agents request to read the full manuscript. But then the other poor thing about book publishing is that it's very, very subjective. And it's a lot to do with luck as well. Luck's a big deal as well. But I had a literary agent comment that my book was more for women's fiction, more commercial women's fiction. But that was the end of that conversation. I had another person who didn't like the fact that it was written with dual focalization, that there was a boy and girl point of view. I'm like, come on, like
that's the kind of linchpin of your
novel.
I
know, it's like, come on, don't you want those two voices and how they end up the way they end up? I'm like, his story and her story. So I just it's very, very subjective. And the third person, I think she gave me advice, but I can't remember it that well because I haven't looked back. It's in my emails, all in that. But I've had that book on hold for a bit, and then the reason how I got my book publishing deal with Zuzil is through Dr. Victoria Flanagan. So I was a research assistant at Macquarie with the English department. Jane Messer was on annual leave at that time, and I had to then correspond with Victoria. So the funny thing was, we were just casually chatting at our meeting, at our catch-up, and she just asked me, what do you write, Claire? And I happened to tell her about my historical fiction background, and then she just happened to remember that she had an email from a publisher looking for students to commission them to write a book. And their thought was, why are we searching for people when we can go to the universities and they're teaching students creative writing? So
we've got all the writers here.
You've got all the writers.
Very clever. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So she forwarded that email on to me, and I just took initiative, which is another advice I wanted to give to writers, is that you need to take initiative and you need to be proactive. And I just got in contact with them, and then from there I had to send a portfolio of work, and presto, that's how I got my book publishing deal with them.
That's amazing. That's a really good story. In your experience working in publishing, were there many manuscripts that came out of the slush pile, or
in my time at Penguin?
In your time at Penguin?
Yeah, there was. I was looking so much to find a gem, that we're all looking for gems, to just pass it on to the right person, a publisher or an editor, because you know what their interests are and what they're looking for, because they all have a list. They all have their own publishing list of books they're trying to fit into their slot of what they want to publish. Because they really, we're looking for these gems. So my first time, though, when I first went into the slush pile, is that I mentioned this with the graduate students, with the internships. I mentioned that the first manuscript I picked up was an exercise book that was handwritten by a gentleman who was in his 70s, and he just had written his whole manuscript, handwritten it. And I just thought, oh my God, what on earth is going on? Don't people read the guidelines? Like, they're lucky. Like, I just was in complete shock that somebody did that. But that was with the adult fiction department. Yeah. With the children's fiction department for Kids Pitch, you need to send your email through to their Kids Pitch email, and that's how they receive the manuscripts. And you usually send about the first 50 pages. So it's all about, again, reading those guidelines and making sure you adhere to them. Yeah. But, I was completely shocked with some of you get some poor quality fiction. In the slush pile. Yeah, there's a lot of poor quality fiction.
I imagine there's lots of strange stuff.
Yeah, very strange. Like, I read a story about, just a girl who couldn't digest food, and then her poos weren't coming out properly, but it was a picture book for kids, and I'm thinking, oh my God. You're thinking, wow, and it was poorly written as well. It was more of like a reflection about her own story instead of like actually getting a picture book written. Yeah. It was completely...
Did it make you feel better about your own writing?
Yeah, it does. But then you're kind of like, wow, how are you supposed to get your work through the slush pile and get through all of this crap and get it into the right hands of an editor or a publisher? So that's why another big advice I keep saying to young writers is that you need to network, you need to attend publishing events, and just volunteering your time to go to this event, like the Sydney's Writers Festival. That's how it's just about networking and meeting people.
So if you're not working in publishing as you were, you just say go to writers' events.
Yeah, go to writers' events, and that's how you get your foot in the door. It's about making those contacts and networking. So
you've got to go up and talk to people.
That's it. And again, as introverts, it's a bit hard, but that's what you need to do. You need to put yourself out there, because publishers are also looking for somebody who can publicize their work. So the publicity aspect of it and the marketing aspect. They want people that can talk about their work.
So what advice would you give to kind of young writers in terms of like getting a kind of public profile? Social media?
Yep. Yeah, big one. Social media. So the one thing I did in 2012 was that I started branding myself as a writer. So created my own website, my own blog, and I started just writing things that I love, my interests. So that's my professional blog. So I published my work up there. I used social media then to create a buzz about it. And I've been doing that since 2012. When I went to Greece in 2013, I wrote all these blog posts about my time in Greece, because I write about ancient history. So, it's about branding yourself, and that's what I've been doing. So just branding. Branding's a big one, I have to say, and using websites and social media.
Yeah, so people know how to find you, and there is a bit of an inbuilt market.
Yeah, and that's a big thing, because what publishers do is they then look at your digital footprint. So they start seeing what you've done. So they go into your website online, they start seeing what you've accomplished and how you've branded yourself, and they start thinking, okay, is this somebody that we can pick up and take hold of and launch their career in a way?
Yeah, so you want a space to kind of show off your achievements
and your portfolio of work as well. That's one big thing as well.
You also talked too about doing things like writing for Grapeshot, which is the Macquarie Uni student publication, as well as other kind of little university publications and, off the ground kind of publications. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that did for you?
So with Grapeshot, when you first start at Macquarie, you pick up this magazine, you think, wow, this is amazing. You start reading. I started reading the creative writing section. I thought, well, why can't I get my work published in here? So it was around about in my first year doing my master's degree, and it was my last year, I think, doing my undergraduate degree, that I, decided I wanted to publish a short story about a rooster that was being burned at the stake because I can't remember now, but they thought it was an abomination, that it was diabolical, and it was the church. So I did a unit on the side with my creative writing, with my unit, and I just wrote about this character from an animal's perspective of how absurd it was to be crucified for being a rooster.
Yeah, so that was based on like medieval animal trials.
Animal trials, and just the irony of the whole thing. Like, well, I don't know if it was humorous. So I got that published with Grapeshot, and that's how I made contacts with that. And then they were looking for copy editors and I think it was just fiction editors and non-fiction editors, so with the different parts of the magazine. So I thought, well, why not me? It's a good little side job, because I was working at Coles at the time, to have, start, expanding your horizons.
Yeah.
So I got an interview, and that's how I got my copy editing job. And then I thought, well, I should be publishing something with Grapeshot. So I asked if I could create a column called History in Review, and that's how I started writing about ancient history, but kind of like using it in a fun way for university students. Right. So the first one was about your university experience and how, it's tough, but at least we're not, a soldier in battle and we're going through that and, dying or whatever. But, I was just trying to use that to just educate people about ancient history. So that's what I did with that. And I also got a poem published with that as well, just using that avenue then as well to just get myself out there.
And that was clever, because you kind of set yourself up as a historical kind of fiction person.
So that's, I thought I could use that as well to launch myself. But then when I was doing my master's degree, I did my manuscript project, which is the manuscript that I'd written. I've been trying to get published. And I started doing research about migrant literature and, multiculturalism as well. So I started doing my research and I got my proposal out, and that's how I then started my manuscript project. I had to write a 25,000 word manuscript for that project. I had Claire Elizabeth Alberts, who was my supervisor. But with that research, it then opened me up to the Greek Australian community, which is what I said to my partner, is that I've got my historical passion, but then I also have this contemporary Greek Australian literature that I'm trying to get. So I thought I need to start branding myself as that type of writer as well. So I came across Our Publishing, just sitting there doing research, and I realised that they were a publisher in Melbourne. And it's by a publisher called Helen, who used to be a university lecturer at La Trobe University.
Okay.
And she's launched Our Publishing to give voice to Greek Australian writers.
Perfect.
So I thought, okay, and on her website at the time it said that you could request for your research to receive a free copy of her books. So I just, took initiative, being proactive again, like I've been saying to people.
Yeah.
And I just contacted her. And then from there, I've created a beautiful friendship with her. And she sent me the books, which was fantastic. And then just reading about that, I was like, wow, the migrant fiction is here. There's migrant literature out there. I've got the voices of migrants who came here in the 70s and 80s and 90s. But now I'm a young Greek Australian woman trying to work out, well, what about our voices now? Is there anything being written about as a 20-year-old now? Is there anything out there yet? So I was looking at the migrant fiction, and then I even requested, if there was a poetry anthology that she was going to publish, if I could be a part of it. And she was actually doing a father's anthology. So it's about, your experience with a migrant father. So I read about my dad in the Fathers from the Edge book that was published by Our Publishing, and it was called The Man Who Loves Greek Culture, and it's just about my relationship with my dad, my experience, and there was other Greek Australian writers as well who have given their experience with their migrant fathers.
Yeah, so just like finding a little thread.
Yeah, finding a little thread
it.
and pursuing that. And then from there, she also gave me advice about getting in contact with the Greek-Australian Cultural League, because they do the Antipodes anthology or periodical.
Yeah.
And there's a literary competition. I thought, well, why not? Why can't I try and enter this competition? You know, so I did that, and I actually won the competition that year.
Fantastic. Congratulations.
So, thank you. with my poem. And it was just about, again, feeling linguistically alienated and about that displacement of having your cultural identity. So then I did, got that poem published, and then ever since then I've been publishing a poem with them every year as a member. So I'm a member of the Greek-Australian Cultural League. Yeah, and again, it's just about educating people. And the great thing is that with the Greek-Australian Cultural League, it's a platform that I've been able to use to help me launch that other aspect of my career. So
and it's a lovely network to have right behind you.
And that's how I did that. Just all the different advice I've received from people, I then take it on board and I think, okay, what can I do?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like being really kind of proactive.
Yeah.
And being very willing to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
Is the kind of...
Which is a bit hard,
Yeah.
especially like I know when you're at uni and you're doing a workshop with people and you're like, oh my God, people are going to judge me because of my work and what I've written. I remember my first time at uni, you know, going to a writing workshop was a bit scary. I wrote a horrible romance about a girl, obviously a girl and a guy and a girl, but it was just so poorly written. That was my first ever writing workshop at Macquarie, and it just got blasted. So I was, you know...
Were you okay?
I was okay. Like the next day, like you self-reflect and you're thinking, wow, it was pretty shit. So it was pretty bad, but then I changed the story and adapted it, and that's when I started, you know, you start getting more educated about creative writing and the do's and don'ts as well.
What are some of those don'ts? Because we've talked a lot about what you should do. Is there anything that you think people should not do? Absolutely not do.
Oh, God, that's a bit of a hard one. The don'ts. That is a very good question. I had some answers for them. I'm just trying to remember what I was going to say.
Maybe don't be too kind of shy, maybe.
Yeah, don't be too shy, and you need to throw yourself out there. So you do need to be proactive. But another thing, with writers, we all get rejected.
Yeah.
You got to build a backbone. So instead
don't take it too personally.
You can't take it too personally. The whole writing world is very, very subjective. But if you know what you want to say it in a good way as well. But with rejection, it's about coping with how you deal with the rejection. Don't start hounding people or writing letters of why wasn't this picked. You got to remove the emotion from the professionalism as a writer. So the one thing I would say, if you've sent your work in and it has gotten rejection, it's one that you're really, really looking forward to, you then need to have a 24-hour meltdown and then move forward and move on. So that's a big advice that I have to say. And Jenny Mortar gave me that advice when I was doing my master's degree, when I was doing writing young adult fiction. So again, I keep taking on board the advice.
Yeah. So listen to advice.
Yeah, listen to advice. Like, people know what they're talking about. The other thing, Dr. Jane Messer also told me that all writing is rewriting. So even though you love your manuscript at the moment, you need to kill your darling. Yeah. It's a big thing in the book publishing world. You need to learn how to take a step back and just give it some time and then go back to it with, you know, the writer's pen, but with an editor's pen, and having your editor cap on.
Yeah. That advice about having a 24-hour meltdown is so good. That's exactly what I was told to do as an academic, because, you know, academics are writers too. We're writing just in a different kind of mode. Every rejection you get,
it's a bit of a hit to your confidence.
It's a hit, but you give yourself 24 hours, then you get over it, send it somewhere else.
And again, I'm mentioning just J.K. Rowling. She was rejected like, I don't know, hundreds of times.
Yep.
But
if she'd given up,
you wouldn't have Harry Potter, and then I wouldn't be here.
That's right. I mean, look at the chain reaction.
I know, that's how everything's just come to be.
Connected, yeah. You talked about editing too, and the kind of, you know, going back to an early comment, you said that there were 3 kinds of edits.
Yes.
There was copy editing, there's structural editing, and then there's proofreading. For those of the listeners who don't know what the difference is, do you mind just very quickly going through them? So
structural editing is when you put the manuscript down, or I'll talk about manuscript. So you put the manuscript down, and it's about looking at the whole manuscript as a whole. So you start looking at themes and concepts that you've written about. So your dialogue, how you've written the dialogue, is it cohesive? Is everything flowing? How are the characters? You're looking at so the structural edit for a character is, have they changed in the story? So the whole point about a book with fiction is that the character, what they are before the change, what is the change, and how are they after the change. So you need to make sure that your character has gone through a character development. So that's the point of that structural edit as well. You're also looking at different themes. What's the main message of the story? Is it in there? So you got, dialogue, the scenes and sequels. That's another thing as well. So looking at how you've written your scenes and each chapter, and is it cohesive? And then going back to the chapter and thinking, okay, is there something that I can solidify? Is there something that I'm missing from this chapter? Is there a goal in each chapter that I've achieved to get to the next chapter so that it flows? So that's looking at the big apps.
So that's like the book as a kind of...
as the whole.
Yeah.
With those big themes as well. And then the copy edit is when you're reading the sentences and your grammar. So that's what the copy edit is about. So that's another edit. And then your last edit is your proofreading, and that's reading the whole book and just picking up those punctuation marks, or that's those spelling mistakes that you've missed while doing the structural edit and the copy edit.
And you always miss things.
Oh,
it doesn't matter how many times you've read it.
I've reread my manuscript from the manuscript project that I've done since 2014, and I've read over it so many times. I actually read 220 pages yesterday.
Wow.
Of just proofreading it and going through stuff and just picking up little things. But there's an apostrophe that's been missing. Like, how on earth did I do that? Or even looking at the word it is.
Yeah.
That apostrophe there, making sure you've got the right it's in there. So that's, again, with grammar and punctuation. But the one thing that I received with really good feedback, when I was doing my undergraduate degree, it was weird because I was getting HDs with my English work, but then with my ancient history, it got picked up that I was getting credits. And then this one tutor said that my expression was weak, so my grammar. So I thought, okay, why hasn't it been picked up with the English side as well? Yeah. So she suggested that I go see a is it a grammarist?
Grammarian.
So I went and saw, I always get confused with how to pronounce that. So I went and saw a grammarian at Macquarie and had a consultation. So I suggest I suggest anybody to go see a grammarian at Macquarie. And he just said to me, the problem with your work at the moment, he goes, it's not about the fact that you're Greek, because they can also pick up with the language thing, but it's not. He goes, the problem is that you're writing your first draft. You need to put your book aside, or your work, even like any academic writing that you're doing, any essays, you need to put it aside for 24 hours and then come back to it and then reread the whole thing. Don't submit your first draft as your assessment. So that's why they were picking up on my expression, because I wasn't rereading my work.
Such a good lesson, no matter if you're a writer or just a student.
A very good lesson. So that's kind of like where the editing aspect of that interest started for me, and I thought, wow, why didn't I do that? So with proofreading for writers, they also say it's good to proofread it by reading it out loud. Could you imagine reading a 400-page book out loud? But the good thing about it is that you pick up on dialogue and just spelling mistakes, but even punctuation marks, you pick it up because your ear can pick up how you pronounce things and how they sound.
And even if there's a comma in the wrong place.
Yes.
The
comma is a big deal. A semicolon or a colon, just the comma.
Yeah.
The pause where it needs to be.
Exactly. And that is advice I give to all of my students.
You need to read it out loud. Yes.
It doesn't matter if it's a 1,000-word essay that you're writing for class,
you need to read it out loud.
Or a 400-page book that you're writing for the world. Yep. Read it out loud. You sound stupid, but nobody cares.
No, but it needs to happen.
It needs to happen. Just lock yourself in your room.
That's it, and read it.
Yeah.
That's it. So that's another big advice that I picked up from Macquarie again.
Yeah.
Just from, just different people. I just take people's advice on board. Yeah.
Well, that has been some excellent advice for our listeners. Is there anything else that you think that you can tell the young writers out there who are listening?
Just persevere and be resilient, and you'll get there. It takes time, but as hard workers, you'll get there. Yeah. It just takes time.
Don't take the knocks too personally.
Yeah.
We all get them.
So build that backbone and throw yourself out there. So be proactive, take initiative, and be resilient and persevere.
Actually, one of the other people who I got in to talk to my class of interns who were going out and doing internships in a variety of businesses, she tries to get 100 rejections per year.
Oh, yeah, that is fantastic. See, that is a good motto. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not because she wants rejections. It's because that shows you how much work she's putting out.
Yes. So the last thing as well to say, when I was doing my master's degree, Dr. Jane Messer said to me, with all of us other students, you need to have a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, which helps you track where you've submitted your work to. the date, who you sent it to, what the work was. Was it a poem, a short story, a manuscript? And then if you've heard back from that person, making sure that you know the guidelines, if you should be sending a follow-up email after, 3 weeks or 3 months. Make sure you have that spreadsheet, and that helps you keep you organized. And then you can start seeing, have on this as a column, rejected or accepted, yes or no. And you can also count. So I've got a little spreadsheet like that as well.
Yeah.
But it's a good way.
And it's nice too, because then you see both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you start seeing, you'll get a lot of rejections, but it's just part of your writer's story, as I like to say, and the journey that you're on.
No one gets it easy.
No,
Unfortunately.
No, you have to work hard.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Claire.
No,
that was
thank you.
amazing. That was so super helpful. I cannot wait to read about some ancient Greeks.
Thank you so much.
So this has been another episode from The Lighthouse. If you could please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, that would be very, very helpful. If you wanted to read more about Claire's work, where should you go, Claire?
You should go to my blog. So you just have to type in my full name, Claire Catacouzinos.
Do you want to spell that?
Yeah, so it's so Claire, so Claire, and then Catacouzinos, it's 12 letters, so Catacouzinos, and I'm on WordPress. But yeah, you'll be able to find me, hopefully. Will be up on the podcast. My name will be on there.
Yep.
You guys can easily copy and paste it.
Yeah.
Because it's a 12-letter long surname.
We will put links to your website and to all the social media stuff, Twitter
fantastic.
and so forth, so you can easily find Claire.
Yes, thank you so
when her book
much.
comes out. So thanks once again, and we'll see you again in a week.
Thank you.
Bye.